Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everyone, we're back. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ. Across from me, Jason. Actually, one of the people across from me, Jason. Jason, how you doing?
Oh, doing great, AJ.
I'm excited for this show. We brought another special guest on. You know, in these episodes that we talk about things that we may not have a whole lot of experience about, we love to bring special guests on. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about playing a varsity sport in college. And so we brought somebody that has many years of experience in the college area, whether it be playing as a student athlete or actually from the academic side as well, or the admin side as well. So I would love to introduce my good friend, Jaclyn Donovan. Jaclyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, AJ, especially since you called me special. So I'm doing really awesome after that.
It was in the doc. It was the word. I almost skipped over that word.
Of course you did.
And I tried to add many years of experience, but you know, can only.
Yeah.
I'm getting the brother-sister dynamic here. So you guys...
It's more of like nephew and older aunt.
Yeah, he had to get the older in there. Hey, you know, I have gray hair, but at least I have hair.
That is very true. I have hair. It's just on the bottom of my chin,
AJ
not on top of my head.
He's got plenty of hair.
Well, like I said before, we are talking about playing varsity sports in college, being that student athlete in a college environment, and it is different in nature than just being a student athlete in high school. So that's why we wanted to bring this up on a topic, and also why we asked Jaclyn to be a part of it. So, Jason, you good for that?
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Jaclyn, you good for that?
I'm ready.
Before we jump in, AJ, let me remind everybody, visit Reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Check out our social media handles on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel as well, and also on our podcast apps, right? Spotify, Google, Apple. Get the notifications of when we drop new episodes and things like that. And then lastly, make certain if you do visit our website, drop us a line. Let us know the things you want us to talk about. All right.
Well, Jaclyn, if you've never heard us before, hopefully you have, but if you haven't, we always start with a quick question, which is just something kind of personal to let the audience get to know us. And I think the best quick question we can have for you that's geared towards playing a varsity sport is, can you tell us your experience of playing a sport in college?
Sure. I played 4 years, a full career of softball at Georgia Southern University. So Division I softball. It was a few years ago. We won't say how many, but a few.
What position? What position did you play?
When I first got there, third base and shortstop, because I was an infielder coming out of high school. The second baseman broke her hand, so I played second base for a month when I was a sophomore. Then I got moved to left field, and then the center fielder messed up her shoulder, so I got moved to center field. I ended up staying there for 2 years.
Okay, if you'd have made the full transition to right field, I would have said it was because the skill level was diminishing.
No, I got 2 years in center field is where I finished, and I wouldn't go back to the infield now if you paid me money. So,
no pitcher?
No, man, I couldn't pitch. That's too fancy for me. I was doing good just to get it thrown in.
I hear you. Now, you, like I said before, you also have experience on the administrative side as well, correct?
Yes. I was a Division II administrator for, 10 years, right at. And then I've worked 2 years at the University of Kentucky during grad school. So I've got 2 years at the high Division I level, and then 10 years at Division II. So I've seen athletics from all sides.
And that's co-ed, right? You've seen the females side and the male side, right? That's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why we wanted to bring you on, because you have a good amount of experience from both the student side and the admin side, which I think is going to help our listeners understand it even a bit more than just hearing somebody who played the sport in college. Like me, I played 2 years at Georgia Southwestern. I played soccer for 2 years. I was in the inaugural team, so it's not an established program, so we don't have a standard really there. We were kind of growing it then, and then we moved up into NCAA Division II, and that's where I met you to begin with. Because you were our trainer at that time before I left. So, and we've just had a great relationship. We work at a camp every summer together, and so we've had a great relationship ever since then. A very fun-loving, joking relationship.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's get into the main topic because I have a feeling we're going to be able to go pretty far on this one because of your knowledge and our questions. So I'm going to start with this. What are some benefits of being a student athlete in college outside of the obvious? Oh, I can go pro. I'm going to get exposure.
Well, honestly, AJ, if you look at the statistics of how many college athletes actually go pro, very small.
Yeah.
So, just to be flat honest with everybody up front, the chances of you getting drafted or anything, very slim, but the chances of you being able to go to college, get a degree paid for while you have a good experience, those chances are very high. And when you're a student athlete, there are a lot of people at that university vested in your success, because their jobs depend on it. Their jobs as a coach depend on you being eligible so you can play, so they can win and they can keep getting their contracts renewed. So there's a lot of people that want you to succeed. How many people really depends on, how big of a school you might be at. At a place like Georgia Southern or, God forbid, UGA.
Hey.
Did I say that? But no, I mean, your bigger schools, you've got a whole staff of academic support personnel that'll make sure that you get registered for the right classes and they keep you on track and make sure that you're going to classes, and that if you're falling behind in your grades, they encourage you to keep up. A lot of your freshman athletes, will be required. You might be required to go to study hall in your first year or two as an athlete, because they want to make sure, one, that you're studying for your classes, and two, that also helps kind of acclimate you into that college academic rigor of what's expected of you as a college student. So, you've got the academic support.
So, not to interrupt you, but I can jump in really quickly. Advising a lot of student athletes at our college, I particularly, for some reason, have a good number of people from the tennis team. They have so much support in terms of understanding what they're scheduling. A lot of these students are international, right? So they've never seen this before. They've got less exposure than somebody coming out of high school in the U.S. because, at least they've seen some of that. But that help is instrumental for them. And even the people who have seen it before, getting in the classes you want, figuring out the right schedule where it fits your practice and stuff, that's got to be hard and stuff. The fact that they come to us, and because folks like you are there in support that can help them through this process, it makes our life a lot easier. But I can recognize the benefit from our viewpoint as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like I said, they want to see an athlete succeed. So there's, academic support, and, that's the main one, but, financial support, and really just not a whole lot of hand holding per se, but they're going to give you every possible opportunity to do what you need to do and to be successful at it. So they're not going to let you fall too far because their jobs depend on it.
I will tell you one thing too. In classes, oftentimes, our students, some of them will do poorly, right? They're failing in class, things like that. And you reach out to the student and they're just like, yeah, I'm busy, whatever, right? They don't give you much back. But at least with the athletes, you can always go to the coaching department and kind of tell on them, right?
Yes.
And get the reaction, right? When you tell their teammates, tell their coach.
And from the teacher side, an instructor, I've done the same thing. And, unfortunately, like, you feel bad, like you're kind of going around the athlete and telling on them. But sometimes, that's from the academic side, that's a pressure point for an athlete. If you get in touch with their coach, the coaches are going to be keeping track of you. So there's not a lot of room for slacking off as a college athlete if you want to be a successful one.
Yeah, we get actually at our college, JJ, you'll back this up, we get an email that asks us, how's the student athlete doing during the semester, and we give a full, assessment back to the coaching department so they can track and make sure they're on top of things. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, what do you feel from the student athlete perspective? What do you feel would be the toughest things about being a student athlete?
When you're in college, there is no off season. You have a championship season and you have a non-championship season, and that takes up the whole year. So there's no, and depending on what sport you play, you're not guaranteed Thanksgiving or Christmas or spring break. I never had a spring break.
We just did a whole episode on spring break.
Oh goodness, yeah, that's one I missed out on. And as an athlete, that's just what you have to expect. So, I mean, you don't get a lot of downtime.
Hearing you say this about there's no off season and you don't get spring break and you don't do this, I'm starting to realize now why I didn't go pro. Why I was never drafted.
Well, there's lots of things you could have gone pro at, AJ. We just can't talk about them here.
And I just want to say, is that the only reason, AJ? Is that the only reason you didn't go pro?
We're just going to go with that reason. That's the only reason I didn't go pro.
I mean, he did use the word play, and that's kind of loosely used, I think, for AJ.
It's hard to play the bench,
Yeah, true. But yeah, I mean, so you come in and, so if you're playing a spring sport, so spring is your championship season. You don't get to take the fall off because you're practicing the entire fall to get ready for spring. And same thing for your fall sports. Your football that's in right now, they started practicing, if they ever stopped, they started up again in July,
So I was going to ask a question about that. Do you see any difference between the sports? I mean, say it's swimming, right? You probably saw that at a big university like Kentucky, versus something that's pretty much at every college, like baseball, right? Is there some difference in the amount of time and effort that has to be put in throughout the year? Like, obviously baseball and football, everybody knows the seasons and stuff like that. But what are you doing during your summers? Like, what are you like? How does that look for the different types of teams?
It varies a little bit from sport to sport, but if you're playing college ball, especially when you get to your D1, and a lot of your upper D2, heck, any college, let's just say that. I mean, you get to that level, you're serious about the sport, you're going to be working on something all year round. Now, swimming, the timing of it is going to be different than, say, football, because swimming is more of a crossover sport from fall to spring, so it's kind of a winter deal. And swimming and diving, typically, a lot of times they practice early in the morning and get an early start to the day, whereas football will be in the afternoon. So the timing of it might be different, but when you get to that level, when you're playing at a college, swimming and diving, volleyball, tennis, they are all spending just as much time as football, and everybody is maxing out. NCAA has a certain number of hours each week that you can spend on athletic activities, and every team, it doesn't matter what that team is, they're going to max out every minute of what they're allowed to spend, and they're probably going to take a few more, but they're going to get every minute that they're allowed, no matter what the sport is. And those hours change from the championship season to the non-championship season. But they're still going to get every hour out of you. Now, you might be up early lifting weights and then going to class and then going to lunch and then going to practice after lunch, and then going to study hall after practice. So your days fill up pretty quick with things that you're required to do if you want to be a student athlete.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever see any of your student athletes working a job at the same time as they're playing sports? I mean, that just seems ridiculous.
It really is. Not very often. Some of your, maybe at a Division II or Division III, you might have a little more opportunity to do that because you're just in a smaller program. But Division I, you're just not going to have time.
No.
Even like as a player, my major required a lot of extra hours. So I technically had a job just to be in my major. And that was a struggle. My coach, I had trouble getting my coach to let me keep that major because of the time commitment I had to put in on the academic side that kind of took away from athletics. So most of your athletes, they just flat out, you won't have time to have a job. Except maybe in the summer, you'll have a little more free time in the summer if you need to make some extra cash. But
so I actually, at our college, I coordinate student interns, and I routinely talk to athletes, and they have to look for internships during very specific times. Usually, it's just the summer. During the year, it's not even a possibility. So, that's, you said something really interesting there. You have to talk to your coach about your major and the classes and stuff, as far as what you can fit in terms of practice and work and everything that goes along with class. Do you feel like there are majors that you absolutely could not do while playing sports, or it would just be ridiculously difficult to play sports and do that major?
Two,
AJ,
I would
you
say.
might have an opinion on this one too.
Well, I was an athletic training major, and I had a classmate. She and I were the last two student athletes to go through that program. I think, that was many years ago. So that's a tough major. And I'd say, so a lot of programs now just don't even, if they tell you if you're going to be an athlete, you just can't do this major. The one that's really tough, I think, is nursing, which is unfortunate because nursing is a great field and we need nurses. But because of the clinical hours requirements for somebody to be a nurse and to get that degree and to be a good nurse, to put in all those clinical hours, it just doesn't mesh with practice. Unless, if you have a coach who is willing to work with you on it, and you can time out the season of it, it's possible, but it's difficult. Because when you get toward the end of a nursing degree, it's really majority of clinicals, and it's going to, both semesters, fall and spring, you're going to have a clinical, but, one of those semesters needs to be you playing ball or playing tennis or swimming. So it's just hard to work those clinicals in.
Well, in a previous episode, we talked about the idea of contentment and versus being happy, and how choosing the major you're going for needs to kind of fit in that area of contentment. Should the fact that you're a student athlete have an impact on the decision of a major?
AJ, I think that's up to the athlete.
Yeah.
If you want to be a nurse, or you want to be an athletic trainer, or you want to be an art major. Art was another one that we ran into a little bit of trouble with because they had to do kind of a lot of the in-person, drawing classes that typically were only scheduled in the afternoons. But you know what? If you want to be a nurse, then sometimes, you might have to hit that point where you have to decide if what your career is going to be for the rest of your life is worth sacrificing to have, 1 or 2 more years of being an athlete. And it would be a really tough decision because you grew up your whole life wanting to do nothing but play college, sports. And to reach that point where you might have to give up that college sport to pursue your career dream, that's a difficult decision. But I've seen a lot of athletes, come into that and have to make that decision.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing when I was going in through college was, in the fact that I played sports in college, was different than most people's. Like you said, you came right out of high school, went into college. I stopped playing soccer. Well, I stopped playing soccer prior to high school in terms of a team, because my high school didn't have a team, a guys team. So I coached it and I stayed with it, and I still played, games and whatnot. But the first year and a half of my college career, we didn't have a soccer program. And then they implemented a soccer program, I think, like I said, year 2 or year 3, I can't remember. But and the coach that was there, I had known the coach previously, and we started talking. He's like, "Hey, why don't you try out for the team?" So for me, college ball, me playing college soccer was an afterthought. It was never to me in the cards. And then the opportunity arose, and I was like, sure, why not? And I tried out, and I made it, and it was fun. But it was never the thing of, I'm going to base my career off of that. And when I had to make that decision on, okay, something's got to give because I've got too many things going on, soccer was the thing soccer was the one that lost the competition there. I couldn't do it.
Well, let me ask you a quick question too. This might be relevant to some people. So say you are all about sports and this is what you're going to do. You're going to focus just as hard as you can, and you're going to do whatever major fits into that. Is the fallback option saying, okay, I graduate, I don't turn pro, or this doesn't become my career and that's not what I do? And how does grad school fit in there? So can you say, all right, well, good. All right, I got the undergraduate degree. Now I can go to grad school and I can follow that master's of accounting and become a CPA, or I can follow a master's of whatever type of therapy or training or whatever and do that or whatever. Like, should that be part of the equation? You should go ahead and make the decision that you're going to need a secondary degree type scenario.
Yeah. I think if you've got a student, if you're thinking far enough ahead, then it should be. If you're going to commit to 4 years, no matter what, there are majors that fit that. You could get a business major, which is a good degree, and it's one that you could, I think, complete fairly easily while being an athlete. But then have the option that if you did want to go to grad school, you could pick an area that you want to specialize in, whether it's accounting or marketing, or just an MBA, a generic MBA. So there are some majors like that, but if you've got somebody that picks, psychology or general studies, I mean, there's just, every school offers different majors too. But I think it takes some forethought, and you might need to look into it with an advisor on campus, somebody who's connected with the athletic department. But again, I think that comes down to just personal choice. Do you want to take a degree with you that could be useful to you later in life, or do you just want to get a degree while you're there because they tell you that you have to go to classes? So, I mean, and I think there's some of both. I think the percentage of the just get a degree is probably very small. But if you just want to get a degree because you have to go to a class to be eligible to play, then you could pick whatever major you wanted to. But I always encourage the students that I talk to now to find something that you're interested in, that you're going to enjoy doing, just in case sports doesn't work out for you. And then you see a few that are, they're going to play, they're playing pro ball and they're still finishing a master's degree. Or they finish a master's degree right before they get drafted. So you've got both sides of it, but it just takes a little forethought and planning.
On a previous episode, we talked about balance, the work-life-school balance. What was your experience with the sports school life balance?
Oof. It was tough because, I really, you go to class, you go to lunch, and then the whole afternoon was my sport. So I would have to go to the weight room and work out, and then, do that 3 days a week, and then go to practice. And then the other 2 days a week was running or agilities. There are some mornings you'd have to get up and be at the track by 6 because you were going to run that morning before you go to class. So class all morning. So I had an 8:00 class every semester for my entire college career. And I absolutely hated the students that slept in every day and didn't go to class until like 2. So
that was me.
Yeah, you. Exactly. That's you in the corner. So, I was in class from 8 to 12 every day, every semester, because I knew I was going to be on the field or in the weight room doing something for sports all afternoon. And then, when my athletic training major kicked in and I had hours to work, I was at work at 6:00 in the morning with the football team, went to class from 8 to 12, went back to football from 12 to 2, went to softball from 2 to 6, and then went back to football from 6 to 7, and then went home to study.
So social life wasn't really a thing for you, huh?
No, there was no social life. Saturday nights, maybe after a football game, was about the one night a week I would give myself. And that was only because football was a fall sport. My sport, softball, was a spring sport. So during our championship season, we made kind of a team agreement that we would not party too heartily during the season. Because I can't say we never did. But, especially, we had games. And plus we were gone just about every weekend in the spring anyway. So, it was tough. I would stay up until, I probably averaged in college, about 4-5 hours of sleep a night, maybe. I learned to sleep on a bus. If I could wedge myself into a seat without rolling off when he hit the brakes, I could be asleep before we left town on a road trip.
Sounds like a pretty important skill to have.
Oh, it's very, very important. I could sleep anywhere.
Let me ask you this. So you had a major that required a lot of you in terms of going to different sports training and stuff like that. For the average person, the business major, and somebody who's not doing a lot of extracurriculars, right? You're not in the clubs, you're not in the leadership positions, you're not in all those things. You're just taking classes and you're practicing playing. Are you going to see that kind of time demand? Right? I mean, how does that compare? How does the average student come in and expect their life to be? Because I think a lot of student athletes also come in and look forward to that partying aspect as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of student athletes who come in and can party, like they want to, because they're going to do it either way. But I think your basic, business major, your regular college student athlete, you still expect to have your classes, probably all take up your entire morning because most of your teams are going to practice in the afternoon. So you can't take an afternoon class. You might have an opportunity at a night class if that's the only time it's offered. And nowadays, with the rise of online courses, you have more opportunities to take an online course, and that frees up a lot more of your time. The catch with online courses, and I tell everybody, and y'all are instructors, this too, but if you're not a self-starter kind of person that can make yourself log into a class every day and keep up with all the online assignments without seeing a teacher 2 or 3 days a week to have them remind you what to do, an online class is not for you. Regardless of how much time it gives you to have to yourself, if you're failing an online class, you're just going to have to take it over.
I could not agree more. We do it. AJ and I talk in a separate episode about the different formats for classes. If you are not self-motivated, then the online class is not for you. It will leave you behind, and there's way less hand-holding that can happen in an online class than in a normal traditional. You show up to class and see the professor, and they can tell whether you're hungover.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But like I said, the normal student athlete, you take your classes in the morning, so a couple on Monday, Wednesday, a couple on Tuesday, Thursday, and you're still going to have some free time in those mornings. So if you can find a little bit of discipline to use an hour in the morning to study and do some homework so that you're not having to do everything at night when you're finished with practice and you're tired and you just want to eat something and go to bed. I think it's all about learning how to manage your time and to make everything fit in a good place where you still have time for you. I mean, I think something that I was horrible at as an athlete was sleeping, and I survived it. I managed, I graduated. I didn't fail any classes. I didn't have to drop out of any classes, but I just didn't sleep, And so it's a wonder that I had the energy to do everything that I had to do. So I think, thankfully now, the athletic departments focus more and realize that that's, more of a priority. So they do focus a lot more on student athlete health as a whole athlete, not just what they're doing on the field. So good sleep habits, good study habits, good nutrition. That's another thing that has been on the rise in athletic departments a lot more than when I was a student athlete.
Clearly, they didn't focus in on that when I was a student athlete.
No, but they spend a lot more on it. Like I said, nutrition and sleep, just trying to take care of the athlete as a whole person. So it's a lot better now. But just like I said, finding your balance as a student athlete and knowing, how you function best, and can you study late at night and do well? Do you need to study during the day? Everybody learns differently too. And I think that's something a lot of students don't figure out until they get to college. Are they a visual learner? Can they learn just by listening? So I think being at college and being a college athlete, you learn as much just by being there as you do in some of the classes that you take. You figure out how to manage yourself as a person and how to take care of yourself and be on your own. But you've got to invest a little time into figuring that out.
Do you ever see a scenario where playing sports makes you a better student, makes you learn more than you would otherwise, even based upon the time commitment. The only reason I ask is because, like I say, I have mentored a number of high-level athletes. I remember one, we had the number one, probably the best NAIA player in any sport ever come through our school. He won singles and doubles national championship 4 years straight. He was number one all the way through. He was just amazing. When he played in the NCAAs, he was dominant all the way to tournament finals. Like, I mean, he didn't qualify for NCAA for a number of reasons, but he was incredible. But he also had a 4.0 GPA. He was academic All-American. He was amazing. And, when I talked to him, he basically said the structure, right? The structure that sports added made certain that he allocated his time the right way. So do you ever see that? I mean, for specific types of students, can you see playing sports being the thing that makes them a better student than they would be otherwise?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, the structure of it. When you step foot on college campus day one, you are handed expectations. Of when you're going to be at practice and what you're going to do for the team to be a part of it. And then, that to be a part of that team, you have to maintain certain academic standards as well. So having the structure of that athletic life to accompany the academic requirements to stay in that athletic life, I think that gives athletes a better focus. And I think a lot of schools, you can look at most of your student athlete GPAs, as an individual, as a team, as a whole department, are going to be better on average than majority of your non-athletes, just because they have that focus.
I was going to say, I remember when I was playing on my on season, my grades were better than in my off season. And I always thought it was really interesting because, I mean, I had that extra level of time commitment with the sports, but my grades were better. And I don't know, a lot of it, there's people say, well, the more active you are, the more your brain does its deal, and you can think clearer, you can think more critical when you're actually active, and it held true for me. My grades were a lot better on my on season semester than my off.
Yeah, I think it's just focus.
Yeah.
You get that. Most of them get that. So there's going to be some that just don't get it. They can't catch on. And unfortunately, they'll fall by the wayside. But you'll usually see that pretty quick.
Yeah. You mentioned something a little while ago about scheduling and the way the scheduling was on season and off season. Do you have any advice for upcoming student athletes or current student athletes when it comes to scheduling their semesters out?
Well, probably the best one is to say, whatever your championship season is or whatever your in-season semester is when you're going to want to take your lighter loads. So you don't want to take 18 hours or 20 hours if you're going to be in season. And if you can avoid some of the classes that are going to be very taxing and demanding and put those off to the off season, I'd balance it that way. Because so your in season just takes a lot more time and focus than the off season does.
Yeah, and I would say too, just from my personal experience, and I would imagine you would say the same thing, is you really need to stay connected with whoever the authoritative figure is, the admin, about the classes that you take, because every semester you have to take so many classes to be eligible to play, depending on the semester that you're playing, your in season is, and so you want to make sure you have those classes. I remember what it was at NAI, we had to pass 12 per semester. Was that correct? I can't remember exactly the number.
You had to be enrolled in 12.
Okay.
You had to, but at the beginning of each semester, to calculate your eligibilities, that was when they go back and count up how many you actually pass and get credit for.
Okay.
But for continuing eligibility, you have to be enrolled as a full-time student, which is typically 12 hours.
So one piece of advice I'm hearing here is, okay, you've got this team around you who you need to have as part of that team, as part of at least on the academic side. So we get to see it as professors. At our college, we have assigned to us a certain number of academic advisees, students, and we tell them, look, this is what you should be taking type scenario. But the athletes have somebody on their side as well that's helping them with that. They get priority registration, right? But we also have academic advisors that do a little bit more in terms of what classes are going to count where and things like that. So who are the people you've seen as part of that whole group that the athlete really needs to utilize in terms of like have them read into what you want to do and what your expectations for your education is and stuff like that?
Well, if the athletic department has an academic advisement team, you definitely connect with them. Some of your smaller schools may or may not have enough personnel to offer that directly. But there's also the compliance coordinator and the compliance staff. Those are the people. They're not necessarily going to be able to advise you on what classes to take, but they're the ones who are tracking your eligibility. So they will know, how many hours you've passed, how many hours you need to be eligible. And because they know what you've passed or not, they can kind of tell you, they can look at your major checklist and see what classes you still need to obtain that degree. That's a pretty simple roadmap on how to get the classes you need. So somebody in the compliance department would have that. I know that when I was in compliance for a year and working on the admin side, we kept those major checklists on everybody. So I knew what class you needed to take. And there's going to be somebody in that athletic department that has the same access to those materials. So they know what you've passed, what you failed, and what you still need to take. So
who handles the scholarship aspect? So lots of student athletes have scholarships, right? Is that somebody that somebody different? Who is that as part of that whole team?
Scholarships are kind of a combination of the coach. It starts at the coach, and then kind of ends up back with the compliance coordinator. So the scholarship in every school is different. Your bigger schools are going to have more money to give than a smaller school. But even your bigger schools are going to take, in many cases, getting a full ride to play a sport doesn't always happen. Maybe if you are a 5-star stud, you might get a full ride.
But if you were a negative star bench warmer, you didn't get one. I can tell you that from experience.
You got a T-shirt, right?
I did get a T-shirt. I did get one of those.
But there's a lot of times, because your teams, you get, a budget is a budget, for better or for worse. So a coach is given a scholarship budget that they can work with within a year. So they might have room to give one person a full ride. But then they might have to take the rest of their scholarship money and divvy it up to make a full roster. So one person might get, a quarter of a scholarship or a half scholarship.
How often does prior, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, how often does other information come into the fact of giving scholarships? So in Georgia, we've said this before, we have the Hope Scholarship. So if a student athlete comes in and they have the Hope Scholarship, then they essentially don't have to pay for the college tuition. So would that be information that a coach would use to say, hey, I'm not going to give you a scholarship because you just don't need it right now, and I'm going to give it to somebody else who may need it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's also, honestly, that's a big recruiting tool. If a coach can look at you in high school and say, this kid is going to be eligible for the Hope Scholarship or the Zell Miller or whatever it's called now. If this kid's going to be eligible for a full Hope Scholarship at my school, then, they kind of bank on that. And they say, okay, I can offer them just a little bit more on top of that. And, and honestly, it is a good financial offer. You may feel slighted because you're not getting a full ride. But if you honestly look at how much money you're getting to pay for your school, you'll still be making money at the end of the semester.
That's why I didn't get a scholarship, because I had hope. That's the reason.
Yeah, so that's why it pays to make good grades now while you're in high school, because coaches will use that as a recruiting option, because that will help them stretch their recruiting dollars just that much further. I was one of those kids. My coach got me for a couple $100 and some free shirts and some free shoes my first semester. That's what I got. Now, by the time I graduated, you didn't get free shoes?
I didn't get free shoes.
They didn't at least give you some some equipment to work with? I mean, you still had to
the
go
only
out and get
equipment
your own
soccer players
glove.
have is,
I mean,
only equipment soccer players have is shin guards and cleats. And I had cleats. And if you know anybody that plays soccer, we try to find the smallest pair of shin guards humanly possible, just to say that we have it. And yeah, I gave you all kinds of crap for that. You hated me for that because I tend to get, playing keeper in college, I would come out sliding and I'd get nailed in the shins, and I'd have to come see my athletic trainer a lot. So, and then she said, why don't you get bigger shin guards? Because I don't want bigger shin guards. But no, I didn't. I had my own cleats, and that's all the equipment we had.
You bought your own gloves? Were you out there in work gloves?
I had some gardening gloves on.
trying to keep going.
No, I do. I will take that back. They did get me some gloves. That was I remember that. And they had. I think they gave us a couple pair because those things smell to high heavens.
Yeah, they did.
They're awful.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so that's how coaches stretch their money, because they're working on a budget. So they're gonna give just a little bit to somebody who's gonna have academic money coming in. But then even that person, by the time if you stick with the team and you work your way up, if you do well, then you can probably expect to get more scholarship money each year from that coach, even if you're still getting the Hope Grant, just because you've earned it. Because that's what happened to me. So
Jaclyn, turning pages real quick. Here's one that we haven't addressed that I know students are going to care about. How long can you play in college? I mean, what is the longest you could extend this thing out for, eligibility?
Well, probably easy answer is 5 years, because you can take a redshirt year and not play. So if you're a redshirt, especially you see this a lot in football, you might see somebody when their name pops up on the screen, it might say, redshirt freshman. Mm-hmm. So that means they came in their very first year and they were redshirted, which means they practiced, they did everything with the team, they're still part of the team. They just never played in an official game.
Now, can't they play in some kind of game, or play like maybe one game or a few minutes or something like that? And
I would have to. I'm a few years removed from all the rules, and they change them every year. There are some minimums that, as long as you don't exceed the minimums, then you can still retain that redshirt status. But a lot of times, especially like football, the minimums are usually a percentage of the team schedule. Well, if you play in one game, that usually will put you over that minimum percentage, because there's not as many games on a football schedule. So it depends on the sport, but there are some minimums in place. And the same thing there is a medical redshirt. So if you were to get hurt and, have to have a surgery that ended the season for you and you missed a year, as long as you meet the medical redshirt minimum. So if you hadn't exceeded that minimum percentage of games on the schedule, then you could get a redshirt year for medical. Or even if you've taken a regular redshirt year, you could still get a medical redshirt year. So that would extend it to 6.
Can that come in the middle? Like if I got hurt my second year playing, could I take my third year off and still play fourth and fifth year after that? Or does that medical redshirt have to happen at the beginning?
No, it doesn't have to happen at the beginning. So medical can happen anytime.
Okay.
So if you're in your third year and you hurt yourself at the end of your third year and you have to miss what would have been your fourth year, but you want to come back and get that fourth year of playing, mm-hmm. You can go through the compliance department and the sports medicine department. They'd have to work together to apply for that medical redshirt. But yeah, medical redshirt can happen anytime.
Okay. That makes sense.
I'm preparing now to make my comeback to college soccer. So I'm excited.
Well, AJ, that does beg a pretty good question, right? So you're obviously still a young, fit man in your prime, right?
You are lying through your teeth.
So if you wanted to go back, like NCAA has some pretty strict rules. If you're not a traditional student coming out of high school, or like military or something like that, like right after high school and then come back, you can't play NCAA. Is that correct?
Actually, you probably could attempt it, because what NCAA eligibility works on is they just have a clock of eligibility. So once you play your first year, that clock starts, and you have, I think it's like 6 years or 5 years to play for. I mean, so they start a clock on you, and it's a certain number of semesters that you have that you can play within that time period.
Okay.
So like, let's say, AJ only played 2 years. So technically he would still have, 2 years that he could play, but his time limit has run out because it was so long ago.
I was just going to say it was last year.
But he, that time he had timed out.
Okay.
So
now, and my understanding is the NAIA is a little more flexible on that because a lot of people who don't qualify at NCAA level time-wise, you might have played too many professional matches or something like that. You can actually go back to NAIA and still play ball.
Yes, and honestly, I don't have a lot of NAIA experience because by the time I got into the admin levels, we were already on the way to NCAA.
Okay.
So all I've ever known was NCAA rules. And all I can really say about NAIA is that they just weren't as strict.
So for some athletes out there who might not qualify because you took some money or have an agent or something like that, you might still have an option going to NAIA versus NCAA.
Yeah. And honestly, with the whole name, image, likeness thing coming up now, that's something that we never had to worry about, as an administrator. So I'd be curious to see how the NCAA is going to change its bylaws to reflect that, because now, if they can get money for their name, image, and likeness, then, where does amateurism go and how does that fall in to being eligible to play college sports? So I'd be interested to see how those bylaws look for this year.
Yeah, I'm interested too. Because, in football, football being the major one, but you also have other sports out there that has, like golf. Golf is the one that came to my mind where they say, okay, if you play in a tournament, you can't accept anything over $500 in value. Used to be. And now, because of the name, image, and likeness, does that mean that they can actually play these tournaments that have a bigger purse or whatnot? Because obviously it doesn't have anything to do with name, image, or likeness, but it does have to do with, a college athlete getting some kind of extra funds.
Yeah. And honestly, if you've got a name, image, and likeness that somebody wants to pay you for, then you need to find somebody who can give you good advice and consultation on how to make it work so that you don't affect your eligibility.
I just wish they'd have had that when I was in college, the name, image, and likeness.
You'd still be broke.
Exactly.
You were just hoping to stay off some wanted ad, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we didn't want your name, image, or likeness anywhere popping up in town. Trust me.
I'd have had to pay for y'all to take it down.
Yeah, your picture was posted in most stores around campus. Do not serve this guy.
Exactly. That's probably it.
Yeah, we actually had an athlete who shared the same name with a poor, unfortunate soul who kept getting arrested for like DUIs.
Oh.
And it kept popping up in the paper. And we're like, dude, have you got a twin? Are you in trouble and not telling us what, So this whole name, image, likeness thing is taking a complete turn from what it used to be in the past.
Well, this has been an awesome episode. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed having you on. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us and the listeners about your experience and things that they can help or they can do to help their situation as a student athlete. I really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you on again if we can talk to you about, once we get into the life episodes, because we know you have so much experience in the life side of things. So,
yes, many years of life ahead of you, AJ. That's right.
And we have a special episode planned for not just international students, but particularly international student athletes and some of the hurdles that they face. Because, it's increasingly common to go get athletes outside the U.S. now. And they're
soccer is a great example. I knew if the other team playing us didn't speak English, we were in trouble.
Right. No kidding. Which was every team that we played.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot to talk about there. So we could definitely follow up with you more.
Well, Jaclyn, again, I appreciate everything. I appreciate your time. Come talk with us.
Glad to help, fellas. Glad to be here.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Well, as always, Jason, you got any parting words before we head out?
Just want to remind everybody, what we talk about is what you want to hear. So drop us a line on our website or on social media and let us know. If there's a topic you want us to cover, we'll cover it.
Awesome. Well, until next time, we hope to see you then. Goodbye.
Take care.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.